Hi, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the True Middle. I am your host, Paul Melikivi, and in the True Middle, we take on the real issues that are impacting everyday people from a real perspective. This is not your regular political show. You want to tune into the True Middle? We'll give you the real truth here. We're going to break down the stories about politics. We're going to break down stories about religion and faith. And we're going to break down stories about business. We're going to do this in several different formats. So if this is the first time tuning in, we have a podcast. We also stream on YouTube, so you can check out that YouTube channel. It's the True Middle. Today we're going to talk about one of the topics that's on all of our minds. It is the Democratic debate. They just had their fifth debate in Atlanta, Georgia, and boy, it's packed with some stuff, some interesting things coming out of that. Now, I don't know how you feel about it, but I have a lot of thoughts, so we're going to dig into that. So, buckle up. We're going to get into it. The Democratic debate. 10 candidates, 10 of our Democratic candidates that are fighting to be the president of these United States took the stage to talk about what was supposed to be their key issues, to talk about what they can do for the American people, talk about what they can do to make this country great, moderated by MSNBC, 5 different hosts. I sat there, I watched this debate, and boy, I was upset. There's a lot of things that they missed, a lot of things that they could have done better. We're going to take on some of these issues, but ultimately, guys, what we're missing is that this debate, 10 people on stage talking for 2 hours about topics that moderators are choosing from them. These moderators chosen by these large conglomerates, these large corporations. We're never really going to get to the true nitty and gritty about the real things that are impacting us in the middle class. The middle class makes up a great percentage here of the United States. There's some serious issues that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a broken healthcare system. We're dealing with a widening gap between the income gap between the rich and the poor. We're dealing with situations where wages have been stagnant, whereas corporate profitability and productivity has increased. We are losing our grasp on being able to live the American dream because our companies that used to take care of us and provide great lives is no longer in the business of taking care of their employees. They're chasing the profit. And over the years, this is just getting worse and worse and worse. And so we have some candidates for the first time that are taking on some of these large issues with some huge, interesting visions. You have Cory Booker, Tulsi Gabbard. You had Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden. You had Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang. You also had billionaire Tom Steyer on the stage. Interesting group of people. All very different in their approach, all very different on their experience and what they've been through. But ultimately, the debate was lopsided. Your four leading candidates, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Elizabeth Warren. They seem to be the favorites, the darlings of the media as they get into it. So we're going to talk about a few things. Now, keep in mind there were some good moments. There were some good moments for all of the candidates to speak about particular issues. Cory Booker, I thought, has for the first time really introduced a vision and a concept about entrepreneurism, about how we can get the people that are have been left behind, that typically are the workers and those that are working low wage jobs and going to work to try to make ends meet, and looking at ways on how we can empower them and get them out of poverty and this cycle of debt and poverty, and actually put their future into their own hands. And the one way that we truly do that is through having them develop their own businesses. And I find a lot of power in that. I find a lot of truth and freedom in that. But this is the first time this came up. There's been 5 debates that these politicians have had. This is the first time that it came up. And it only came up because Booker really forced the issue. None of the moderators asked questions about it. None of the moderators seemed to even care about it or elaborated on it. He just made sure that he kind of got that in there as he was answering some other questions about some other issues. So the number one issue that wasn't discussed, that should have been discussed: how do we empower people to become entrepreneurs and start their own businesses. Those people that don't have the resources that these millionaires have, or the rich people or people from privilege have, who can afford to risk all of this money, who have resources to make sure that they're being able to pay rent and keep up with life and still take on these risks associated with running a business. So that was the number one topic that we missed. We talked a lot about healthcare, and healthcare, I believe, was probably the largest portion of the debate. We talked a lot about that. Every candidate has similar but different views. The big debate is Medicare for all versus Medicare for all who want it, right? So a couple of the leading candidates, you have Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, some of the more progressive candidates. They're advocating this Medicare for all concept, where they want to totally eliminate insurance companies, totally eliminate private insurance, and have this universal Medicare for all so everybody could get involved. Everybody agrees that we need healthcare. Everybody agrees that our healthcare system is broken. A lot of personal experiences of why that's the case and why it's true. Over the course of these podcasts, we're going to talk with people, ask them about their experiences and what they had with our healthcare system, why this is such a huge issue, why this needs to be fixed. I know I have my own personal issues with healthcare. I actually saw my mother, who actually worked herself basically to death, because when she was diagnosed with cancer and she was getting treatment for it, she could not afford to quit her job, because by quitting her job meant that she would lose her health care and lose the access that she needed to get the treatment that she needed for the cancer. So yes, it prolonged her life, but in doing so, she literally worked herself to death. I saw her getting up sick and trying to fight this cancer. She didn't have the time that she needed to really get strong and healthy. She had to get up day after day after day, go to work. Eventually, she lost a battle to that, and it's horrible to see. It is a problem that's inherent in our healthcare system, where we have private healthcare insurers meeting our needs, and most of that healthcare is through our work, through our employment. So our employers sometimes provide health care, sometimes they don't provide health care. You contribute into that, and you hope that you're covered. And when you get sick, then it's this big debacle. So a lot of things to discuss about healthcare as we move on with these podcasts. We'll have a lot of ones dedicated to specific policies and ways that we can improve that. But a lot of time spent on that. Ultimately, it comes down to a decision. Which candidate do you want to support? Those that really believe that we should abolish private insurance altogether, or should we work at a system where there's other health care that's available? We have a choice. We opt into a Medicare for all system. If we like our private insurance, then we can stick with that. In doing so, my personal concept is that by doing that, if there's competition and others have the ability to opt into the Medicare for all, eventually we're all going to go that way. It'll force the insurance companies to behave more ethically, to reduce their profits, reduce the expense, reduce the fat, operate more ethically, and maybe in doing so that we'll get some leeway and we'll be able to save the insurance companies. But ultimately, if you want Medicare for all, if you want to totally abolish the insurance companies, then Bernie's your guy, right? Bernie's the one that kind of spearheaded this. Elizabeth Warren has some flip-flop on that now. Some information came out since the debate that may not be the way that she wants to go. Most of the other candidates really believe that it's kind of this Medicare for all for those who want it. But if you want to keep your insurance, then there's ways that you can stay with your private insurance. Pete Buttigieg is kind of the one that was kind of leading that. Joe Biden has been standing his ground from day one. Another thing to point out on this debate is that no information, no conversation was had about universal basic income. This is a platform that Andrew Yang brought to the table with this debate. One of the things that makes him stand out from all the others, there's a lot of talk about minimum wage, and everybody up there will agree that our minimum wage is too low, that it's, a lot of families are going to these jobs paying $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour, and are not able to live off of the money by their jobs. And so that's something that's problematic within the middle class. We see it every day. I see it every day. There's people that are going out working 2-3 jobs. I've personally held 2 or 3 jobs myself at times to make ends meet. We see that it's a problem because by working 2 or 3 jobs, yes, you're finally able to afford to pay some bills, keep a house over your head, but in doing so, there's irreparable damage that's being done to our relationships with our loved ones, with our children, with our lives, to our health. We're running ourselves into the ground. They want to tout, this administration wants to tout these great unemployment numbers, that the unemployment rate is at record lows. And that may be the case with the measurements that they use to measure that. We all can debate the merits of whether that's an accurate number or not. But the truth is, even for those that are working, those that are employed, they're underemployed. They're not making the type of money that their skills or their talents or their degrees warrant them to make. Oftentimes, they're forced to get into these low-paying jobs and work 2 or 3 of them just to make ends meet. So, all of them will agree that we need to raise the minimum wage. But what is missing is that there's a debate to be had between the merits of raising the minimum wage versus the merits of a universal basic income. So, the universal basic income, in essence, is that everybody who's a U.S. citizen is entitled to a basic wage. So in this particular argument, Andrew Yang's proposal is that everybody over the age of 18 will be given $1,000 a month. That's it. No strings attached. No other reason than you're a U.S. citizen. You deserve this money. You have $1,000 a month to do what you want to do with it. So this concept is rising in popularity. A lot of people on the progressive side, a lot of people that are in the industry of technology, a lot of forward thinkers are really anticipating this serious problem coming down the road where we're going to be losing our jobs to automation. The type of work that we're doing is not going to be available anymore. And so what are people going to do to work to make money? Our economy is based upon consumer spending. So if there is no money, if people aren't making any money, we're not spending any money, we can all agree that our economy is going to collapse. And that's the real deal that we have to deal with. So forward thinking, if there's no money coming in, there's a way that we can have this universal basic income that everybody receives a certain amount of money each month that'll feed the economy. And we can all agree that that kind of makes sense in theory, but we're not at that space now. It's hard for us to envision a future where there's no jobs because that has kind of been the backbone of our industry. So regardless, you set that argument aside, say, okay, well, there are jobs today, people are working. Yes, they are working, but they're working at minimum wage jobs. What if we introduced this universal basic income today and people were given $1,000 a month to do whatever they wanted with? Now, all of a sudden, this really raises a lot of freedom, a lot of opportunities for people that may be working these 2 or 3 jobs. Maybe they only have to work 2 jobs now. Or maybe this person doesn't have to accept that second job that they're making a couple $100 a week on because now they have $1,000 a month, which in turn will allow them to be able to spend more time at home. It will allow them more time to focus on their friendships, their relationships, their talents, their passions. They live happier lives. They go on. They're more productive. They're happier. When they go to their full-time job, they're not as miserable and stressed out because they have some time to pursue their passions and their interests. So universal basic income, one thing that they really, really missed on the debate. I'm interested to talking to a lot of people over the course of these next couple of weeks. We'll find out what their thoughts are on this thing. It's very controversial. It's very new concept on the political stage. This is the first time that this has actually been considered seriously with a cast of candidates. Unfortunately, MSNBC in this particular debate allotted the least amount of time ever to Andrew Yang. He spoke for, I think the study's coming out, he spoke for about an average of 6 minutes for the entire 2-hour broadcast, where some of your leading candidates like Joe Biden, Warren, Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, they all average at least between 10 to 13 minutes apiece. Andrew Yang, the least amount of time from any candidate on that stage, and one that's bringing one of the most consequential, one of the most interesting proposals to the table. Guys, we cannot accept this. This is horrible for a debate to go on and not have one of these serious issues on the table. They want to talk about healthcare. They want to talk about the impeachment. We can all agree that the impeachment is what it is. None of us here today can really do anything to change that. Any of these candidates that are going up for the President of the United States, if they win, impeachment is not an issue. So I don't want to talk about the impeachment during a debate. I want to talk about the issues that these candidates stand for, what they're doing, how are they going to make my life better, how are they going to change things, how are they going to better our lives, how are they going to close this widening income gap between the rich and the poor, how are they going to make our healthcare system something that makes sense, how are they going to allow all of us to be able to live more engaged, purposeful lives, ways for us to go out and live our passions, live our talents, raise our families, be healthy, go out and enjoy life, all these great things that America and the world has to offer. The impeachment, at the end of the day, non-topic, so they spent a little bit of time on that. So I'll give them some credit. They kind of moved on quickly from that. Tom Steyer, billionaire Tom Steyer, his big thing that he wants to bring up is term limits. One of the huge things that we can all agree on, or at least most of your candidates here on stage can agree on, is that the political system is messed up. It's ran by corporate interests. People with money have been running politics for years. There's a lot of studies that will show the increase of the influence of the rich and the powerful that they've had on our political system, on our laws, on our policies and our procedures. It's been more and more power and benefits given to your rich, and less programs and help given to those that are less fortunate. And the reason why is because these politicians are in the pockets of these large corporations. Bernie Sanders, we got to give him credit where credit is due. He's been talking about this for years, even when he was in the campaign against Hillary Clinton. That's been his big thing. Fight back against the corporate interests. Get the money out of politics. If you get the money out of politics, then people can really stop and listen to their constituents. Because let's face it, not every politician has a rich base of constituents. Some people represent constituents that don't have a lot of money. So when you have political influence coming in from people with dollars that are able to fund your campaign and help you get your message out, human nature is you're going to go where it's going to be most powerful. And so unfortunately, our politics have been poisoned with money. Term limits is one thing that Tom Steyer introduced, so that when somebody is elected, that they can only serve so long, right? Similar to the presidency, we are all familiar, the president can only serve 2 terms, and the reason why we put that in there is to avoid somebody from accumulating so much power, right? If you have somebody who's in there for 10, 12, 20, 30 years, they accumulate more and more power, and the risk of that is that you run into a monarchy where there's one powerful person, and there are people that are controlling everything. So term limits with the presidency was great. That was included in our initial formation of government, but that does not pass down to other forms of government. So you have this Supreme Court, which is a lifetime nomination. Once you're in, that's it. You're a judge of the Supreme Court. You're there until you die or you retire. Great benefit to that is that you're not then subjected to having to cater to term elections. You don't have to raise money. You don't have to campaign. You're on it. The idea being that you will be non-biased at that point in time, that you will be able to interpret the law for what the law is and make solid judgments without political influence or without concerns about your job or your future or your security. Good point. Is that really the case? I don't know. I mean, most of the people that are chosen on a political bias, and so once they're in there and they're being represented, they represent the views of those that actually nominate them to the Supreme Court. But Congress and the Senate, right? The House of Representatives, the Senate, these senators, these congressmen, they can keep running, and if people keep re-electing them, they stay in the government. We have governors, we have senators, and we have representatives that have been in there for years. They represent old views. They represent old politics. They represent old ideas of things of the past that are no longer relevant in today's society, but yet they keep getting reelected because you know why? There's some comfort to that. There's some familiarity to that. They've kind of grown accustomed to the people that vote for them. There's name recognition. So when you go into to vote for them, you see the name, you know who they are, you just automatically vote for them because you're familiar with it. You're like, okay, I'm familiar. I know there's not going to be any major changes because it's kind of status quo. So that's a problem that we have in our government, in the system. So Tom Steyer is introducing this interesting concept about term limits. I encourage everybody to look into this, do some research on this, on term limits. I think it could be a powerful solution to getting rid of some of these antiquated ideas, some of these people that have been serving the government for years, that continue to cater to the best interests of corporations, of constituents that continue to fund them with huge money to keep getting reelected. It's time for some new blood. I personally miss Eric Swalwell. When he was in the first debate, he was really pressing this idea of a generational shift, that the leadership of the government is at a time where these new ideas and the way that our society and technology has changed, that it should, have some new ideas and some fresh leadership coming on board, and it really contrasted with a lot of your senior candidates like Biden and Sanders and Warren, when you have these young people pushing for some of these young progressive ideas because they're more representative of the future of this country, not the past. With that being said, I do want to touch a little bit about Joe Biden. Joe Biden, I mean, we all know, or we can, we know him. He was vice president under Obama. We can say great things about Biden. We can say great things about his service to this country, the sacrifices that he made. But he is one of those that's been in the government for a long period of time. His track record can be shaky at best on some of these hot topic issues when it comes to racial segregation. And he was, in the government at a time when there were a lot of things taking place with the civil rights movement. Argue what his decisions were, the result of those policies. But at the end of the day, this guy is on a debate stage, and I mean, he's just not articulating his points. He's cutting himself short. He's forgetting a lot. He's misquoting himself. He's just not as sharp as some of the other candidates. And I don't know why the mainstream media always wants to make excuses for him. We keep covering him, we making excuses for him. It's like, well, that's just who he is. He's always had these gaffes. And okay, but I mean, we don't want gaffes from our president. We don't want somebody that can speak articulate, that can go up there, that can defend their points, that can give solid representation of the policies that they're trying to pass. Their heart may be well intentioned, but at the end of the day, your heart is not going to win you the president. Your heart is not going to get things done. You actually have to be articulate. You have to talk about it. You have to push it forward. So we're making these excuses. I don't understand what's going on with that. That's just part of the representation of the problem that we're having right now, where these large corporations, these old school political pundits that have been doing this for years, are still convinced that things are done the way that they used to be, that they go out and they poll and they take these sample polls of people and say, well, the polls are showing that people are this way or that way. A lot of these pollsters are not even reaching a lot of these people that are going to be voting for the first time, that never voted before, people that are just now getting engaged in politics. They're not going to be partaking in these surveys, these polls. It's outdated. It's just a mess. We need to forget about the polls. We just need to get down on the ground, and we just need to get these candidates to talk about their policies one-on-one. We need to give equal time to each of these candidates when they're on stage. I mean, you knew you were going to moderate the debates. You knew this debate was coming. It's been on the schedule for a long period of time. You knew there was going to be 10 people. You knew it was going to be 2 hours. You knew that, some of the questions you were going to ask. I don't understand why we can't come up with a system where you ask each of the candidate the same question and let them all articulate their own policies, practices, ideas about those particular ideas. You take some of the top ideas and you ask the same thing each of the candidates. You go down the road, let all 10 of them expand on it, have a little back and forth, some additional questions to fill in. And what's the problem with that? Then you get a kind of a fair, moderated debate where everybody's able to weigh in on the same issues. Maybe each debate covers different things. Climate change is a big thing that you're talking about. Healthcare. Talk about universal basic income. Talk about minimum wages. Talk about money in politics. Talk about term limits. Ask everybody the same question, because the way that is built up, you ask 1 or 2 people a question about one topic, and then you move on to a different topic, but there's a candidate over to the right or over to the left has some strong views and some strong ideas about that particular topic or that particular question, and you never get to hear it. What's going on with that? There are so many questions that they were asking Buttigieg, that they were asking Biden, that they were asking Sanders and Warren, that none of these other politicians, none of these other people up for president were able to articulate. They have some strong and valid points and opinions on these ideas, and I just think we need to hear from some guys. I don't know. I'm a little discouraged by the debates. I know that there's going to be many more. Hopefully, as they narrow in and more people, exit the race, we have more time to spend with each candidate. But it's a mess right now, and something needs to be done with it. We need to speak up. We need to let them know that we need to be heard, that we need equal representation from each of these candidates that are out there. They're putting forth effort. They're raising dollars from American citizens to fund this campaign. There's hundreds of thousands of Americans that are giving their hard-earned money to support a candidate that they think represents their values and their interests. And they get up on stage, and these moderators don't even give them an opportunity to speak on behalf of these people that have been feeding into their campaigns. Check it out, guy. Andrew Yang made a big deal about it. I'm going to be a little biased, but he did really push the fact that he felt discriminated against, that the debate was biased. There's a call. Check it out. Boycott MSNBC. Hashtag Let Andrew Speak. We need to speak up, guys. We can't just accept this and say that we're going to let the media dictate what we want to know, what we want to hear, what candidates we support. They're going to keep honing in on the same top 3, top 4 candidates based upon what they think, because they're the ones that are moving the direction. They're the ones that are giving the candidates the airtime. They're the ones that are discussing their policies. They're the ones that are putting out the polls and saying, these guys are leading. These are the ones that are favorite. How do you know who I'm voting for? How do you know who my family is voting for? You can speak to me. I don't speak on behalf of my wife. I don't speak on behalf of my son. We each have different opinions, so you speak to me, in my household, you may get 3 different answers on who we support, what we find important, what our main concerns are. You can't just sample a couple thousand or a couple 100,000 people and say this is representative of the United States. This is ridiculous. We've got to stop it. Just ignore the polls. Ignore the polls. Let these candidates say what they want to say. Let these candidates run their campaign. And when it comes time to vote, let the voters speak up. Let the voters have their choice as to what they want. Guys, there's a lot of juicy stuff going on there. Kamala Harris has some strong points. She spoke up for the African American community. Specifically, she made us some great dialogue about women and mothers in general. This is another area that needs a lot more of the debate. There's a little bit of engagement with Booker on this topic. Some back and forth with her and Pete Buttigieg about representing some of these minority communities and the best way forward on that, and the experience and knowledge to be able to represent minorities. There's a lot of juice there. Again, one of those things that just kind of got blown over, wasn't part of the initial discussion in the debate. Kamala Harris, she brought it up. She made some strong points on that. A lot of back and forth about foreign policy. Usual answers. Some people are going to say one thing. At the end of the day, our foreign policy has been a mess. It's been getting worse. We need to do something different about it. But we all need to know we all need to have a better idea of what these candidates plan to do when they're office, how they're going to attack that. So an important question I find. Very relevant. I think we need to know. They need to dig a little bit deeper. I think there were some softball questions that were just kind of thrown out there. Nothing that was really in depth that would really give us a good indication. At the end of the day, you have to really get into a candidate's heart, their soul, their beliefs, the way the way that their worldview is, in order to understand when they're given certain situations, how are they going to react. What are they going to do in this particular situation, right? So we need to get a little bit deeper into the candidates, into their individual policies, and their thoughts and their worldviews. Some of them have books. Some of them have websites. It's in our best interest, guys, as we're getting into election season, to really dig in. We're going to go on this channel. We are going to go in depth on each of the Democrat candidates' policies. We're going to go onto their websites. We're going to take a look at their policies. We're going to talk about what each one of them stands for, some of the more important points, some of the things that differentiate them from the others. We need to take it upon ourselves to go in and do our research, dig in, and learn about these candidates. We can't depend on the media. We can't depend on what we hear at the debates from giving us a full picture. There's a lot of candidates that have strong views, that have some great solutions to some of these problems that we're going to be facing here in the future, some of the problems that we're facing here today, some of their history, some of their research, things that will really be mind-blowing to people who've never really dug into politics. And I know that a lot of us are busy. Maybe you're at home, you're watching TV, and there's nothing else on, so you're like, I'll just sit and watch the debate and see what these these people have to say, right? Maybe you're real passive, you're a little disenchanted because the political system hasn't been working for you in your particular situation, that you feel as though no matter who you vote for, you're basically trying to vote for the better of two evils, right? That regardless of who's going to go and win the election, who's going to go into the White House, that your interests are not going to be represented. I get it. I understand. Maybe you're somebody who's new to the game. You're getting into it for the first time because you're young. This is your first time you're able to vote, and you're trying to understand what it all means. You're trying to understand the system. You're trying to understand the candidates. You're trying to tune in to get an idea of what they're about, what this whole election is about, what are the important topics to consider. And you're watching these debates, and like, I really can't identify with any of these because, I mean, foreign policy is not the first thing on my mind. I'm thinking about college, I'm thinking about work, I'm thinking about my family, I'm thinking about my life, I'm thinking about how I'm working 2 or 3 jobs to make the ends meet. What are these candidates really going to do? They talk a lot about, yes, I understand this problem, this is my personal story, this is what I feel about the problem, this is what I've experienced, this is what I've seen. When I've talked to people on the trail, this is what these people tell me. Understand that when these candidates are out on the trail, who they are talking to are not you and I. These are people that are actually showing up at their campaign rallies, people that actually go out of their way to attend these events. These are not your normal, everyday working people that don't have a huge interest in politics. Yes, they want a government that works for them, but they're not particularly interested in spending too much time and effort on it because they're too busy making ends meet, right? So the representation that we're getting at these rallies, at these campaign stops, and the people that the politicians are speaking to, that are supposed to be representing the true middle, the middle class Americans, is not necessarily you or I, or the average person that's home or is working 2 jobs that doesn't have time to spend 8 hours to go and watch a politician talk about their policies, right? Nor do we sit there and have tons of time to sit down there and go to each and every person's website and make sense out of it to read the issue. So we have a real conundrum here. If we're going to make a decision and we're going to choose somebody that's going to represent the Democratic Party for the election, we need to know the candidates, we need to know what they're about. We need to have some of these conversations. We're not allowed to have these conversations, guys. You go to work, first thing work tells you, you can't talk about politics. You can't talk about religion. I'm tired of hearing. I was at work the other day talking, and the topic came up. We started engage a little bit about politics right away. We get shut down, right? Leadership is like, we can't talk about this at work. It's too divisive. It causes too much discord among the workers. So if we can't talk about these issues at work, right? We go in and we can't talk about these things at parties. Where do we talk about these things? We need to have an opportunity for us to discuss this so people can learn from one another. I can understand somebody else's viewpoints. I can understand somebody else's situation and be able to make some decisions that are best for everybody. We can't just be so pigeonholed to our own ideas and our own opinions. Guys, this is some stuff. I'm looking forward to future broadcast with you guys as we talk about this stuff. Chime in. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to go in, like, comment, subscribe. If you like what you have to hear, you're interested in hearing some more of this as we move forward, hit the notifications button so you get notifications when we're up live, when we're having these broadcasts. If you're tuning in on the podcast, make sure you stay tuned. We'll have these weekly podcasts. Listen in. I want to hear some thoughts. I want to hear some ideas. If you're somebody out there that wants to engage with me, if you are a business owner, if you have some type of political interest, if you have some ideas on some of these big initiatives, gun control, health care, universal basic income, minimum wage, student debt, a lot of these big issues that are part of the debate today, give me a call, reach out to me, let me know. I'd love to get involved. We're going to be having a lot more interviews with people. We're going to highlight some differences in politics. We're going to share some opinions. We're going to talk as individuals. It's not bad to talk to people that have different ideas, that have different opinions, that have different life experience. We need to do that, guys. We need to get involved in that. My experience is not your experience. My experience is not the same as my wife's experience. But we get together, and by talking to each other and talking about our experiences and what we've been, where we felt, how we feel, then that allows us to better understand one another so we can understand as a country where we need to go and move forward so that we live in a country that's, with all of its resources, with all of our great resources, that we have a country that's passionate, right? That's compassionate towards its citizens, that understands that we all just want to be able to live a life, to be engaged, to be happy, to be able to engage in my individual talents and my passions and do what I want. Some of us will get paid more money for doing it than others just because of the natures of industries, and that's fine. But can we make a living doing it? Are we able to support our families if we do this? What kind of chances, what kind of risks do we have to take in order to live a life where we're living our passions? And that, again, is an area that we really need a lot of discussion on, ways to do this, ways that we can move forward, ways that this country can really invest in its citizens so that we're living these lives that we all dream that we want to live, right? The American dream is not dead. The American dream is just a lot harder to reach than it used to be for a lot of us. As the income gap increases, as the rich and powerful have a little bit more political power, a little bit more influence over policies, it's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. And if we don't make any changes and get involved now, guys, it may be too late. We may never have that opportunity. We're coming to a precipice in our society where action is needed. Get engaged, guys. Follow me wherever you listen to your podcast. If you're a YouTuber, if you watch YouTube, follow me on The True Middle. Subscribe to this channel, guys. Reach out to me. Let's engage in some conversations. Next time, we're going to talk about Michael Bloomberg. He just entered the race on the Democratic side, changes some things dramatically, a lot of things that we can dissect out of that. So stay tuned. Next week, that's what we're going to touch on, guys. Thank you for tuning in to The True Middle. I'm your host, Paul Melikivi. I look forward to talking. Thanks.